Every project has two architectures. The visible one, systems, timelines, deliverables, and the invisible one, stakeholders, influence, and trust. Stakeholder strategy is how you design the invisible architecture, and today we're going to blueprint it together. I'm Dave, and welcome back to Project Management 101. Today we're exploring one of the most overlooked drivers of project success, the stakeholder management strategy. Whether you're launching a new product, redesigning a legacy system, or driving a change transformation across a business, stakeholders can make or break your momentum. Let's break down how to identify, analyse and engage with your stakeholders with purpose. First up is the Stakeholder Matrix. This maps your stakeholders' interest in your project versus their influence in your project. On one axis, we have power, how much influence they have over your project. On the other axis, we have interest, how invested are they in your outcomes. Using this matrix, it gives us 4 quadrants to map our stakeholders to, and each one defines how we communicate with them moving forwards to support the project. On screen, you'll be able to see those 4 quadrants. So up in the top right corner, you've got the high interest and high influence stakeholders. And these are people that we treat as manage closely. This is normally people like the project sponsor or regulators or compliance teams or legal teams. So people that we work with really closely to ensure our project delivers the outcomes that we're all working towards. So up next, there's the high power and low interest category. We like to keep these stakeholders satisfied. They could be teams like legal teams that are less interested in the outcome of your project but need to be across it. So we like to give them regular updates but don't need to keep them as closely monitored and don't need to work as closely as we would with our project sponsor, for example. And up next, we have the low power but high interest group. So this might be the end users of whatever you're delivering, or teams of people that are genuinely affected by the outcome of your project. So you need to keep them informed, but you don't need to work as hard in terms of corralling their stakeholder needs more that they'll need the outcome. So you want to think about the way you communicate with that group. And finally, we have the low power and low interest group. So these are peripheral stakeholders. They might not have any direct outcome required from our project. So a glance in interest may be shown, but we don't need to do anything in particular for this group. However, we do want to monitor this group closely because they may change in terms of their status into more interested parties or more affected parties as the project moves forward. And with that in mind, don't think of the stakeholder matrix as a static piece of documentation. Revisit it regularly. Stakeholders shift as the project evolves. So up next, let's think about strategic context. Your stakeholders don't exist in a vacuum, they're shaped by context. Using the PESTLE analysis helps you to analyse external forces on your project. So under the P, political, are there any policy changes which could be affecting your stakeholders and how they operate? Under economics, are there any budget changes or market shifts that they need to be aware of? Under social, are there any cultural expectations or workforce trends that they need to be aware of? Under technological, is there any disruption or innovation that they need to know about? Under legal, is there any compliance regulations or other things they need to consider within that space? And under environmental, we should take a step back and think about our sustainability and our impact on the environment. So the PESTLE analysis has a good outward looking view which allows us to understand some wider operating context. We can also undertake a SWOT analysis which allows us to reflect on our current situation and working practices with the stakeholders to ensure that we can target our approach effectively to maximise engagement and therefore the success of the project. So the SWOT analysis looks inwards. We're thinking about what are our strengths. Do we have strong stakeholder relationships? Do we have a strong understanding of the project that we're undertaking? And then, do we have any weaknesses? Do we have any weaknesses in our relationships or our understanding of the project that we're undertaking? Are there any gaps in trust? Do we have any capacity constraints within our teams? And then we think about opportunities. How can we co-create value, whether that's with the stakeholder or wider teams where we might be working on projects in parallel? And then finally, threats. Is there any resistance brewing? Is there any noise that we're hearing within the wider stakeholder conversations that means we're maybe not going to get the support and backing to move forward with the project as originally envisaged? It's a good idea to use the SWOT and the PESTLE analysis to help you anticipate your stakeholders' reactions, not just respond to them. So up next is the stakeholder management approach. This is where strategy meets execution. The communication management approach is your tactical playbook. It defines who needs to hear what, when they need to hear it, how you'll deliver the message, and why it matters to them. And then with that, you need to think about tailoring your communications. Executive team members may prefer dashboards or briefings. End users might prefer workshops and walkthroughs of the technology or whatever the project outcome is. Regulators will want documentation and audit trails. And it's worthwhile applying some key principles here that I use when I'm doing all of my communication, and I always advise any project management peers or team members that I work with to use these guiding principles just as a general rule of thumb around great communications. Always ask, what do I want the person who's receiving this information to do once they've received the information? If you need help, say so clearly. It's really hard to try and pull that out. But by explaining that you need it, it helps the stakeholder or the colleague to act more quickly. And if you don't need any help, it's great to explain what you're doing about a situation. That could be quite light touch, but also to describe the timescales around which you're undertaking that action. And that just gives everybody a clear point in time regroup opportunity to check how you got on and if you need some help then. I think if you're doing face-to-face communications, you should think about the hear, see, do principles. And I'd encourage you to spend a little bit of time doing some Google searches to understand what that means for you in your context. And for those of you in change scenarios, apply the know, think, feel, do framework. It's really powerful. And if you're doing written communication, there's a great rule of thumb to read back whatever you've written out loud to yourself. And I mean properly out loud. It might feel a bit silly, but it's a great technique to spot typos, spot where the flow doesn't quite make sense. It's quite natural to become a bit word blind as you're reading through the text. You've read it 5, 10, 15 times or so, you stop seeing typos, you stop seeing the nuance because you've written it. By reading it out loud, you force your mind back to go, okay, no, I understand, and actually that was wrong, or I didn't mean that, and you've got the time to correct it before it's sat in front of that senior stakeholder or somebody else. And within the communication management approach, it's really important to think about what are the feedback loops. Communication isn't a broadcast, it's a dialogue. So how do I pull in my stakeholder communication? How do I bring back any feedback from users? Think about that, take some time, make sure that's documented in the communication approach also. So, stakeholder strategy isn't just a box ticking exercise, it's the heartbeat of your project delivery. Make sure you identify your stakeholders, analyse their context and influence, engage them with purpose, and communicate with them with clarity and empathy. So we're going to close off this video. I'm going to suggest you go and review your stakeholder matrix. Just check your stakeholders are all in the right spots. Maybe spend some time reflecting on your communication plan. Make sure that that's hitting the nail. And then I'd love it if you share any stakeholder management tips that you've got in the comments below. Let's learn from each other. I'm Dave. Thanks for watching Project Management 101. Make sure you like and subscribe for more practical advice in project program and delivery management. That's all for this week. From chaos to clarity, take care.